Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of Scary Stories to Relax To. I believe we have 10 stories in total. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 3.5 likes on this video. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post videos just like this one all of the time. Sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. For 25 years, I was in a rigid routine. I'd work in the mornings, come home to my wife later in the afternoons, and we'd spend our evenings together eating her home-cooked meals and watching TV until night came, and we would go to bed. Then we would do it all over again. Sometimes I would doubt our life together. A nagging voice in the back of my head told me I didn't do enough for her, that we should want for more. But then I'd wake up and hear her singing softly as she cooked our breakfast, and any doubts I had would fade away. We would have kept going like that forever, but we never got the chance. I'm sat here alone now in our bedroom, huddled up in a blanket, typing on my laptop and eating some awful fast food. I can't bear to leave this room. I know that if I open that door and walk down that hall, I'll pass what used to be our kitchen. What remains is just an open, lifeless room. The cabinets had to be torn out and the floor ripped up from the damage. I arranged for some good men from the church to take the stove one day. I couldn't bear to be there when they took it. I left the front door unlocked and hid like a coward until I heard them leave. I already burned through my bereavement leave, and I haven't gone back to work. I just sit in our room and listen. I keep hoping to hear her voice again. Instead, all I hear is silence. The house is so quiet, so still, and in those endless spans of silence, my mind fills in the void with harsh memories. The thoughts eat away at me like acid. Sometimes it's questions about what I could have done differently. Other times it's like a film on repeat, the scenes playing out relentlessly. On the worst days, in the cold silence, the thing that consumes my mind are those final moments I had with her. A week before it happened, she told me what was wrong. It was a warm Monday afternoon and I had just gotten home from work. She was in her usual place, cooking over the stove. The sound of sizzling pans, seared steak filled my ears. The room was slightly smoky and it smelt heavenly throughout the house. I could feel the heat as I walked into the kitchen to greet her. She was wearing some jeans and that tan cardigan she liked over her blouse. I hugged her, head over her shoulder, and asked how she was doing today, like I did every day. I expected her to say something sweet in her usual way. Instead, she surprised me when she said, "I'm cold." I laughed at her. I thought it was a joke. I mean, it was a nice 84 degrees outside, and it was noticeably hotter in the kitchen. I genuinely thought she was just pulling my leg, but no. She didn't laugh back, didn't even smile. She rolled up her sleeve and showed me her goosebumps with a look of tentative concern. We figured she had a weird fever. She didn't feel particularly warm, but we decided to treat it like a fever anyways, and I put her to bed after dinner, skipping our TV shows that night. She got under the covers, despite me telling her not to, but I let it slide. As I was leaving the room to let her rest, I remember how she grabbed my hand and she asked me if I would stay for a prayer. Church had always been more of her thing than mine, but I didn't mind. I thought she might feel better if she did, so I closed my eyes and let her pray. Dear Heavenly Father, hallowed be thy name. You are the Father of health and wellness, and Satan is the father of sickness and suffering. I pray that this sickness will leave my body, and I will feel your warmth once again. In your name I pray. Amen. She seemed satisfied, and I wanted to give her space, so I left and tended to the house. I washed the dishes, cleaned up the kitchen, and watched some of our shows without her. I remember feeling lonely that night. Her absence felt like a tear in a winter coat. When I came to bed, I was relieved to have her by my side again. I was sure that in a day or two this fever would pass and she'd be right by my side again, but this wasn't a fever. Our routine was disrupted into something new, something worse. Now I'd come home and go straight to our bedroom to see her. She insisted on turning off the fans and keeping the door shut. When I opened the door, my glasses fogged. I'd find her, kept under more blankets than I remembered giving her, usually sleeping. I'd sit by her and ask her how she was feeling. Each day she gave the same one-word answer, each more disheartened than the last. Cold. The task of cooking fell on me, and I thought I couldn't go wrong with some chicken noodle soup. It was supposed to help, but I'm no cook. There was always something missing, something I couldn't give it. But we ate it all the same. I learned I had to let it cool before I gave it to her, otherwise she'd scald her mouth. Not that she seemed to mind. After dinner I would clean up, watch some shows alone while she went back to sleep. Then I'd join her in bed. I'd try to snuggle up to her, to give her some of my body heat. I tried to take the cold from her, but after a time I gave up. She was too cold to hold on to for any long period of time. I wish I held her anyways. Sometimes I would press my hand against her cheek, then her forehead. Sometimes she pressed back against my hand. This sickness had affected her physically, but under those blankets, behind the shivering, somewhere beyond the cold, the woman I loved was in there, fighting. The earliest doctor's appointment we could get was Thursday morning. I took some time off work in order to make the appointment. That morning was a relaxing 75 degrees, but looking at her, you wouldn't know it. She wore a heavy coat and sweatpants with long johns underneath. A scarf and beanie hid her face from the world. Hidden behind the layers, her eyes looked tired. She got looks from the staff and patients alike in the clinic. I checked her in, and she did her best not to chatter her teeth as I filled out the forms. In short, the clinic was a bust. They took her back there and did a standard checkup. Nothing was out of the ordinary according to them. They chalked it up to poor circulation, wrote a prescription, and they sent us away without any consideration. I made sure she took the medicine, but it didn't help her. I took a full day off work that Friday and did what I could. I came back from the store that morning and began to haul in what should have helped. I set up a space heater, draped a thick winter blanket over her, and assured her that I had been looking up recipes for some better soups. Despite all this, I heard her shivering as I closed the door. She laid in there all day, only getting up to use the restroom, but that was getting less frequent. I would sit in there for 10 minutes or so at a time, before having to leave again. The room was too hot now, and I couldn't stand to be in there for any longer than I was. I checked on her often, sat when I could, and when I was out, I would call the doctor again and explain that she was getting worse. She was getting colder. There was nothing they could or would do. Friday night came and went. More soup, more tea, more dishes. I had to take to sleeping on the couch as our room was far too hot for me. Every couple hours I woke up alone, and when I did, I would walk over to the door and listen for her. Once I heard her shivering. Another time she was snoring. Another she was crying. Saturday morning, I woke up later than normal. I began the new routine, start the coffee, start the tea, start breakfast. It was quiet that morning, lifeless. I could never cook like her. She had an aura about her that filled the house with energy when she cooked. Most mornings she'd be cooking, humming along to some song I never knew, without a care in the world. She was happy. Maybe that's what my dishes were missing. Everything I cooked was made with worry. I put it all on a tray and took it to our room. After a night without her, I was determined to bear the heat and sit with her for longer. When I opened the door, I found our bed empty. 7 blankets strewn about the room, thrown off without care, leading to our bathroom. The shower was running, steam billowed out of the bathroom and bled into our bedroom from behind the closed door. I put down the tray and knocked. Then again. Then with more urgency. Each time I got no answer. I had begun to sweat. The heat from the room was bad enough, but the steam from the bathroom felt scalding. I tried the door, but it was locked. I had to think, but the heat was starting to take its toll on me. I felt sapped, exhausted. How could she stand this horrible room? I yelled for her, and when I heard no answer, I used what strength I could muster and kicked the door. Once, then twice, then the door gave way. The heat hit me like an oven, and inside was my wife. I found her in the shower, burned and shivering. She was sat on the shower floor with the water hitting her back. There was a big red circle where the water had burned her. Soft chunks of skin flowed off her back and toward the drain. I learned that she had turned the temperature on our water heater as high as it would go, and then turned the shower on and sat. She didn't know how long she was in there, or how long she would have stayed if I didn't get her. All that she knew is that she was cold. I got her out of the shower. She fought me till I mentioned the blankets, then let me guide her back to bed. I dressed her wound the best I could with what we had and turned the water heater back down, cooler than before. She got really low after that. She refused to go to the clinic again, or anywhere for that matter. The heater and blankets were at home, and that's where she demanded to stay. That night I sat with her. Sweat stained my clothes, but I paid it no mind. My wife needed me. I was at a loss, and I felt desperately powerless to help her. I prayed with her. I thought it's what she needed, and it's all I had left to try. I prayed like she had. I asked God for forgiveness and healing and warmth. I prayed with conviction. I nearly believed it. Maybe I just needed to believe in something. I knew that she believed in it, and if nothing else, I hoped she would feel comfort in the prayer. When I stopped praying, she began her own prayer. What she prayed I can't repeat. What I can say is that the cold had reached her heart and corrupted her faith. She said things I never thought I'd hear from a good Christian woman like her. She denied God and his forgiveness. She promised her soul to the devil, as long as Satan promised that the fires of hell were warm. Any enthusiasm, any hope she had was gone. The cold had taken it away. I slept on the couch that night. That Sunday morning I woke up groggy. The couch had not been treating me well, and the anxiety had treated me worse. I got up anyways and headed to the kitchen. It was time for the routine to start again. She needed me. More coffee, more tea, more breakfast that doesn't quite taste right. When I got to the kitchen, I heard that familiar humming, that comforting sound of cabinets and drawers opening and shutting. She was back, and she was cooking up something heavenly. It smelt like a ham steak, and I remember thinking that was a strange choice for breakfast. But I was just happy that she was feeling like herself again. She was wearing shorts and a tank top. She was reaching on her tiptoes for something deep in the cabinet. When I walked in to greet her, "What's for breakfast, dear?" She didn't acknowledge me. She just kept looking in the cabinet above the stove. I looked at the stove top and saw that the burner was on. As she was reaching further back into that cabinet, she had placed her hand on the burning cast iron pan, and it was sizzling. The adrenaline hit my blood like cement. She found what she was looking for. Before I could comprehend what was happening, she had doused herself in cooking oil. She turned to face me. In her mangled hand she held a matchbox. In her good hand she held a match. In an instant, she and the kitchen were engulfed in flames. She didn't scream. She didn't flail around. She sat on the ground, arms hugging her knees to her chest. Among the crackling of the fire, I heard her teeth chatter. She shivered while she burned. My wife is gone. My life is gone. I have nothing but the memories and this feeling I can't shake. I'm cold. This kind of thing is never supposed to happen, at least not in this country, and certainly not in this day and age. Organ donations are supposed to be safe and regulated, and mistakes like this are not normal. At least, I hope not. I'm old enough to remember a time in my small town when we didn't even have a hospital, and now our little burg has a full clinic and even a couple surgeons. It used to be that if you stepped on a rusty nail, or your uncle had an accident in the mines, or your Meemaw fell off her porch, you'd ring up a friend and they'd deliver you over to Ivy or Haverton or wherever they'd built the newest and nearest hospital, and you'd hope you didn't die on the way there. Sickness is different, though. When your small town's entire economy survived off of the slowly declining output of one of the oldest iron mines in the state, you tend to have a lot of men getting sick, and it's not always something they can just drive you over to the next town to fix. Silicosis, heavy metal poisoning, and lung cancer are our neighbors here. Each their own grim reaper we all expect to come knocking at some point. I was just a kid when I was diagnosed. My parents called it my ailment, but Dr. Hill at IAmChristopherEther called it restrictive cardiomyopathy. The muscles of my heart were too stiff, likely caused by hemochromatosis. Too much iron in my blood. All things considered, though, it didn't hold me back too bad. Sure, I never fulfilled my dad's dream of going to play for Tennessee State, and I still earned my degree. And sure, I did have to ask my prom date to slow down a few times so I could catch my breath on the dance floor, but she still eventually agreed to marry me. When I graduated, my wife and I decided to move back home. Things had changed enough in our town that there were more career options than mine worker or general store cashier. I ended up using my degree to manage a small accounting firm not too far from my parents' house. And when my mom passed on back in '96, we inherited my childhood home. I wish I could say my life was just one big happy success story, but that just ain't realistic. Eventually the mine shut down and half the town lost their source of income. Businesses closed. Not many people needed accounting managers around here, and suddenly I found myself out of a job too. I took a position managing a local hardware store instead, and while money was tighter than it used to be, Henrietta and I managed to survive. It didn't help that my heart was getting worse. Every passing year it was a little harder to walk up the stairs to our bedroom, and every year the doctor's visits became more and more frequent. Martin, honey, I wish you'd consider moving. You could be so much happier at a job in another town, and it'd be so much easier to get you care when you'd need it. Henrietta said to me from behind her coffee one morning. I lowered my magazine and looked at her. It was the first time we'd had this conversation. I had to admit she'd made many compelling appeals. But this was out home. Everyone and everything we know here. Everything and everyone we know is here, Hen. I sighed. Because they're stuck here, Martin. They have mortgages to pay off, and kids that need feedin', and jobs that they're happy with. We don't have any of those things. We're free to go, to build the life you'd planned for. It wasn't the first time she'd said something to that point, but every time I heard it, I softened my stiff heart just a little to the idea. We'll see. Next year, maybe. It was 5 years later in that same home that my wife passed on. Blood cancer. Sometimes a place can take everything you have, and find a way to take more. It was about a year ago when I'd resigned myself to let my body give up on me, to let my weak heart strangle me whenever it saw fit. A transplant was nearly out of the question. My folks had both come from out of state, and there weren't many people dying nearby with AB negative blood. I decided to skip my yearly checkup, and Dr. Hill, who'd semi-retired to my hometown but still helped out when needed, personally called me up at my job to ask me to reconsider. He'd overseen my condition since I was a boy, and we'd grown to be friends as we aged. Martin, if you don't come in, I can't guarantee you have long left. Your heart is manageable, but you need medication and care. What if that's not what I want anymore, Pete? What if I'm ready to go? I'll admit, it had been a dark time in my life, and I was ready. I missed my wife, and I'd hoped she'd be waiting for me. Martin, that's not what Henrietta would want. You know that as well as I do. His words stung. He was probably right, too, but of course I wasn't ready to hear it. I hung up and went back to work. People weren't going to cut their own plywood. It wasn't until about 6 months ago that a miracle happened. At least a miracle for me. I received the phone call at 2:39 a.m. on July the 5th. I'd only just managed to fall asleep after a night of watching the neighbors' kids try their best to light fireworks in the pouring rain. I groggily answered the phone. Dr. Hill's voice greeted me, simultaneously somber and excited, as though he were ashamed to be happy about something. "Martin, we've got some news. There was an accident in town. Some biker from out of state. He was passing through tonight and, well, the rain, he's brain dead, Martin. But his heart, he'd be a match for you." I had my boots on by the time he said the man was brain dead. The town clinic was small, not quite just a doctor's office anymore, but a far cry from a complete hospital. Still, though, they had a morgue and a surgery room, usually for tonsil removals or appendectomies. Dr. Hill greeted me at the front door and took my umbrella. He explained to me that they couldn't keep the heart viable for long and there was no way to get a helicopter in through this storm to take us to a more well-equipped facility, so the surgery would have to be tonight, here. I asked him if I could thank the man who'd be giving me a second chance. He explained again that the man was brain dead, but it was more a symbolic gesture for me anyways. He took me to the room where the man's body laid empty. He was a muscular man, maybe in his late 50s or so, lanky. Long graying auburn hair hung from his head, partially caked in drying blood. His dark complexion, tanned from years of exposure to the elements, was paling and quickly yellowing seemingly before my very eyes. Breathing tubes and an oxygen mask obscured the man's face, but I could make out long, braided beard. The man was covered in tattoos. Torn and bloodied skin hid detail from me, but the dark and faded markings on his skin wove a tapestry of artwork, none of the symbols or designs recognizable to me. There was only one single tattoo that remained unobscured and undamaged, located squarely on his right forearm. It was striking, a spiraling serpent, devouring its own tail. Ouroboros, I think it's called. His body was mangled, broken limbs that at this point weren't worth casting, bleeding wounds that had been haphazardly wrapped just to keep the hospital bed clean. It was saddening to look at. A man, still technically alive, but given up on, for my sake. "His name is Marcus Rain." Dr. Hill startled me with his interjection. "He's from Dallas. I called his emergency contact, apparently his wife, or ex-wife, or something. She says he left home about 6 months ago. Hasn't been himself in a while. Not many people left to miss him anymore. Damn shame, too. He was donated a kidney last year and barely got a chance to try it out." Dr. Hill chuckled, until I cut him a disapproving look. He recomposed himself for a moment. He must have been moved by the gesture. Registered himself as an organ donor a week after his operation. Pass it on, that kind of thing. I softly placed my weathered hand over Marcus's for a moment and whispered a silent thank you as Dr. Hill began to prepare for surgery. I woke up the following evening. There was no ICU at the clinic, so Dr. Hill had called up a few colleagues to come and help ensure my post-operation went smoothly. They gradually eased me off of my medications, and within a few days, Dr. Hill was driving me back home. "Now you remember to stop taking your old medication. It'll interfere with the success of the transplant," he chided. "And take it easy for as long as you can. Let Damien or one of the other clerks saw the 2x4s at the shop, and absolutely no heavy lifting." Marcus's heart was healthy, but there was some minor scarring that could be an issue if you don't let it rest for at least a few months. I reassured Dr. Hill that I'd take good care of myself, but secretly, I was only excited to have a second chance at a normal life. I could eventually start exercising again. I could travel. I might even pick up hiking. Dr. Hill dropped me off at home, but not before once again warning me about the symptoms I could expect in the weeks post-op. Fever, fatigue, chest pain, all supposed to be completely normal. I reminded him that those were things I'd lived with my entire life, and thanked him again before he helped me wheel inside. It was only a week or so before I was comfortable enough to stand again, and not too long after that I held a barbecue to celebrate my recovery. I invited the whole neighborhood, and of course the entire local medical team, who had performed such a miraculous surgery. I bought a new grill from my store and spent the entire weekend doing yard work and preparing my home for guests. Dr. Hill was one of the last to arrive and sternly discouraged me from doing any more manual labor, and reminded me that I wasn't even supposed to be eating red meat because of my blood pressure. As I served him his plate, I shrugged him off and told him that I felt completely fine, and that I just felt like eating steak. It was about a month post-operation that the complications first began. I had indeed started hiking as I'd planned to, and I had never felt more refreshed, until one afternoon. I had hardly begun my first uphill stretch when I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It wasn't the typical dull tightness I'd been used to all my life, but a stinging jab that overcame me for just a moment before subsiding. I called Dr. Hill once again, and he begrudgingly reminded me that he was technically retired, and that if I was going to continue to ignore his medical advice anyways, I should call up the local clinic instead. That stung a bit, but once again, it's not as though he were wrong. I checked myself into our town's clinic, and a young doctor greeted me and sat me down for my appointment. I explained to her my recent chest pain and the advice that Dr. Hill had given me, and she patiently explained to me that chest pain was entirely normal post-operation, even as far out as months after the transplant. She urged me to listen to the advice I was being given, and take as much time as I could to relax. How could I begin to explain to her that I had had to relax my entire life, and I finally felt like I had the energy to live? I thanked her, begrudgingly paid my copay for the visit, and set off towards home. It was less than a week before the urge to be more active again finally overcame my will, and I began to hike again. The chest pain returned every few days, never lasting more than a few seconds or a minute at most. I was completely fine with momentary discomfort. After all, I still had breath in my lungs and energy to spare. This new heart was just settling in, I told myself. After all, it was supposedly a whole new body with a lifetime of energy that had been stolen from it. It was 2 months post-operation that the varicose veins appeared. I'm not exactly a spring chicken, but I didn't think it was normal for those to appear quite so often, or so suddenly. I decided that it would be best if I avoided the doctor entirely for this one. I pulled out my old work laptop and booted up my internet connection, and Googled something for the first time since my wife's doctor told us she had myelodysplasia. Search results indicated about what I'd expected. Varicose veins can appear due to stress, aging, and high blood pressure. That had to be it. My new heartbeat with a vitality and strength that my circulatory system just needed time to adjust to. I excitedly laced up my hiking boots and left on my next trip up the mountain. I remember making it just past the out-jutted rock you could see from my backyard, when I must have blacked out. I woke up in a hospital that I didn't recognize, surrounded by doctors I didn't know and hooked up to equipment I'd never seen before. They explained to me that I'd collapsed on the hiking trail and had been found a few hours later by a local jogger who had gotten me help. I had been moved to a hospital in a larger city a couple hours away, as it was determined that my local clinic was unable to properly assess me. I was badly sunburnt and very dehydrated. But what concerned the doctors the most were my scan results. They showed me a few graphs, some charts, and finally my scan images, and I had a hard time making out what I was seeing. The doctors explained to me what had initially been interpreted as scar tissue by Dr. Hill on my new heart was in fact an aggressive form of cancer. Hemangiosarcoma, they guessed. A cancer of the blood vessels that had apparently gone undiagnosed in Marcus before his death. It had metastasized in me and begun to spread through my circulatory system. The doctors explained to me that my chest pains and my varicose veins were all early warning signs that could have been detected if I'd been taken to a competent facility sooner. They gave me about 5 months to live and sent me on my way. Dr. Hill seemed a little overly smug as he picked me up from the hospital. "You know, I used to work here. It's where I first diagnosed your heart issue when you were a boy." I shrugged, not enthused to endure his "I told you so" old man smugness on the 2-hour drive home. Jesus, Martin, why is it so hard for you to listen to me? You've never been like this. You should never have started hiking. You shouldn't have gone back to work so soon. And you certainly shouldn't be eating so much red meat. The doctors in there told me that, as they were wheeling you in, you vomited a half-pound of pork sausage. What the hell has gotten into you? Who was he to scold me like that? He may be 20 years my senior, but he sure as hell wasn't my father, or my minister. Hell, he wasn't even my doctor anymore. I spat back at him. If I hadn't gone hiking in the first place, they probably never would have found the cancer that you missed. The cancer that you put into my body, Peter. The car ride crushingly silent on the way home. My anger towards him bubbled inside, and I silently enjoyed the sensation of my blood boiling. An emotional luxury my old heart never could have afforded. I felt a hotter anger than I had ever experienced before. He dropped me off at home, and snidely said to me as I exited the car, "If I hear you keep acting like this, I won't be there next time to pick you back up." I was going to ignore it. And I began to walk back inside when I heard something. A small, quiet voice in the back of my head. No one gets to talk to me like that. I was only taken aback by this sudden inner monologue for a moment before I instinctively agreed with it. I turned around and ran back to Dr. Hill's car. He was starting to drive away when I reached it, and I furiously banged on his window. He stopped his car, rolled the window down, and looked at me like I was insane while he began to ask me what the hell I was doing. I swiftly interrupted him. "Who the hell do you think you are, Peter? No one gets to talk to me like that. No one, especially a washed-up, retired surgeon who can't even identify a tumor growing on a heart when he sees it. I'll keep doing whatever the hell I want with the rest of my life, especially as short as it's going to be. To be honest, Pete, I haven't needed you in a long time, so don't count on me ever needing you again." I took a second to steady myself. My body froze in response to the gust of fury that had unexpectedly left me. Long enough for him to notice that my burst of anger only thinly masked the fear I felt. "You're not yourself, Martin," he said to me. "Get inside and clean yourself up for God's sake. You look homeless. Henrietta would be ashamed if she could see you now." Peter Hill drove off without another word, and it was the last time him and I ever spoke to each other. I stared at my gravel driveway, unable to move since my tirade. I couldn't believe what I'd done. In one fell swoop, I'd personally guaranteed the one remaining friend I had was out of my life for my final months. When I finally found the courage to regain my composure, I trudged towards the house. For the first time in a while, it loomed over me like a disappointing parent, and I felt weak and shameful, like I had in my youth. I took a look at myself in the mirror that night. A long and hard look. The doctors explained that I'd been badly sunburnt, but now I could see it for myself. My skin appeared dark and leathery, as though I'd been outside for weeks. Peter was right. I had let my once clean-shaven face become scruffy and unkempt. The hairs that had begun to sprout from my face were unkempt and bristly, unlike the neat and thin hair I had been accustomed to shaving daily. The varicose veins sprawled under my skin, ever darker and blacker than when I had left for my hike early that morning. They had started to extend further, too, now twisting and spiraling across my arms, culminating in clusters that washed my skin with mottled darkness. It wasn't until I looked at my right arm that I noticed a group of them clumped together in an unnatural shape, darker and neater than the rest of my veins, distinctly circular and neatly positioned below my wrist. The image of an Ouroboros tattoo, marked on a dead man, flashed in my mind before I put the ridiculousness of the notion aside. I shaved my face, took a much-needed shower, and applied some alloy cream to my burnt skin, then drifted off into a restless sleep. I was awoken the next morning to a chest pain far sharper than I'd previously encountered. I staggered out of bed, my chest pulsing and sweat dripping from my forehead. This certainly wasn't normal. The cancer must be becoming more rapid, the spread more aggressive. I trudged to the restroom and found, to my discouragement, that the veins had grown darker and more distinct around my body, the circular cluster on my arm ever more resembling a tattoo. I filled a glass with tap water and began to take the variety of prescriptions that the doctors at IAmChristopherEther had given to me. As I raised my hand to swallow the pills, a gruff voice once again whispered to me in my head, my own inner monologue given a tangible voice to hear. "Don't take those. You'll kill me." I stopped for a moment and looked at the pills in my hand. The doctor knew I was going to die anyways. Why should I trust that these pills were going to help me in the slightest? Of course they wouldn't. All they'd do is slow the cancer and prolong my suffering. I tossed the pills in the toilet and began to get dressed for my day. The pain in my chest had begun to subside as I pulled into the parking lot of the hardware store, and I stepped out of my pickup. A cool breeze shot through my hair, and a nostalgic feeling shot through my blood like an icy warmth. As I began my shift, the teenagers who worked for me were flirting behind the counter, stocking the vending machine, or assisting the early riser customers. Each and every one of them stopped to stare at me as I entered. I knew that I had begun to look worse for wear. When the acne-ridden kids with nose rings and green hair are looking at you like you're the oddball, you start to get the feeling enough is enough. I barked at them to get back to work, and they hastily returned to resume their duties. It was rare I lost my temper with them, and they knew to listen. My shift trudged on even slower. My chest felt tight throughout the day, sore and aching, as the veins around my body twisted and mottled my skin. I left work early to go home and get some rest, but I knew that sleep would not find me easily. By the time I finally made it home, I could feel the foreign heart in my chest pounding against my rib cage. I couldn't help feeling like Marcus's heart was pumping cancer throughout my body with all the effort it could muster. The image of a moldy sponge being squeezed into a bucket came into mind. As my head became woozy, I hastily undressed, and as I flung off my jeans, my wallet fell out of my pocket. Poking out the top of it was a pristine organ donor card I didn't remember putting in there. The terrible writhing worked its way through my body, compelled me to put off investigating it until the morning, and I made my way to my room. I collapsed into bed in a cold sweat, and the small nagging voice in my head whispered to me once more, "Sleep, Martin. We'll be all right in the morning." For the next 3 months, my body became a stranger to me. The dark veins that had first appeared as faint, wiggling streaks now sprawled across my skin in intricate, angular patterns. They didn't just grow. They etched themselves, deep and deliberate, into shapes that seemed almost purposeful. My arm bore the clearest mark, a perfect Ouroboros, coiled and unbroken. The black veins so thick they rose under my skin like cords straining against a taut surface. My skin had toughened, as though it had been stretched too far and then left out to dry. It wasn't just leathery, it was unnatural. It didn't even feel like skin anymore. The changes didn't stop. My beard, once sparse and graying, grew back wild and rough, its deep auburn hue swallowing the gray. My hairline, long receded, seemed to march forward, strands of that same unfamiliar auburn forcing their way through the silver black. I stopped looking in the mirror altogether. It only made me feel more alien in my own skin. And then came the growing pains. It began with an ache, sharp and deep, shooting through my arms and legs in the middle of the night. I thought it might be my joints, or some side effect of my failing body. But then I noticed my clothes. Shirts pulling tight across my chest, my jeans creeping higher up my ankles. At first I told myself it was swelling, or water retention, or literally anything but the obvious truth. By the time I finally measured myself, I had grown nearly 3 inches taller. My limbs stretched as though my bones were being pulled apart slowly, deliberately. My joints ached constantly, my body struggling to keep up with the unrelenting rhythm of a heart that wasn't mine. My spine hunched, vertebrae protruding far further from my back than they should. But nothing compared to the pain in my chest. It was more than pressure or tightness. It was movement. I could feel it. Something burrowing deeper into me, snaking through my organs, wrapping around my ribs, anchoring itself to my bones. The pain would come in waves, sharp and searing, leaving me gasping for breath. One night it was so bad it woke me from a dreamless sleep. I stumbled out of bed, clutching my chest, and caught sight of myself in the mirror. My ribs were heaving, my skin stretched so tight I could see the faint ripple of movement beneath it. My hand flew to my chest. For a horrifying moment I swore I felt it. The heart, shifting, repositioning itself like a living thing, searching for a better grip. I doubled over, gagging, and in the midst of the pain, I heard the voice again. Relax. Let it happen. It was louder now, more distinct. Not just a whisper in the back of my mind, but something tangible, something there. It wasn't my voice, and it sure as hell wasn't mine to control. The impossible, terrible idea that it was Marcus growing inside of me had gnawed at me for a while. Every day the thought became harder and harder to push back, and instead it slowly became accepted as an absolute truth. Somehow, some way, he was still alive in me. The idea haunted me, gnawing at me during every quiet moment I had. It wasn't just the voice, the low, gravelly whisper that urged me to give in to my darker instincts, but the sensations, the impulses, little things at first, easy to dismiss. Then there were the memories, flashes of images that hadn't belonged to me, desert skies stretching into infinity, the sting of wind against my face. I saw flashes of burning forests, endless rows of trees that seemed to writhe on the flame. One night, I caught myself humming a tune I didn't recognize, some twangy country dirge that felt as foreign as the veins twisting under my skin. How much of me was still me? How much had been overwritten? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the stress or medication. Maybe it was my body trying to adapt to the transplant, my brain cobbling together fragments of identity to make sense of the changes. But the more I tried to explain it, the less it made sense. The voice grew louder when I resisted. I'd reach for my pills, and it would hiss at me, sharp and insistent. Don't take those. They'll kill me. Me. Not you. It wasn't just the voice either. My body resisted. The pills felt foreign in my hand, their edges sharper against my palm. My throat tightened when I tried to swallow them, as though I were choking on something too large. When I finally forced them down, I felt sick for hours, nauseous and weak, washed with shame as though I'd done something wrong. And yet, when I skipped a dose, my strength returned. My legs felt steady, my pulse strong. I'd look in the mirror and see the changes, muscles I hadn't ever had, a flush of sickening, rosy color in my cheeks. But it wasn't my strength. It wasn't my color. Let it happen. The voice would whisper in those rare moments I let my gaze linger on the mirror. It's who you are now. Was it? Was this who I was, or was I just becoming someone else? I started avoiding people. The teenagers at the hardware store had begun to look at me differently, their conversations faltering when I entered the room. I caught Mrs. Delaney, my neighbor of 30 years, staring at me through her kitchen window, her face pale and drawn. I hadn't said a word to her, but she flinched when our eyes met. Dr. Hill had noticed it before anyone else had. That last time we spoke, when he drove me home from the hospital, he looked at me with a strange mix of pity and fear. "You're not yourself, Martin," he had said, and he was right. I was losing pieces of myself little by little, every day. The way I walked, the way I talked, the way I thought, it was all shifting, tilting towards something I didn't recognize. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to believe I could stop it. But every time I tried, the voice was there, whispering, coaxing, reminding me of the truth I didn't want to face. Whatever was growing inside me wasn't a foreign body. It was part of me. I needed answers. Last month, desperate for anything to make sense, I hired a private investigator to dig into Marcus's life. His online presence was sparse, and the few photos I managed to find of him didn't match the man I'd seen on the hospital bed. Still, I scraped together what I could and sent it off, along with a chunk of my savings. 2 weeks later, the investigator sent me a file. Marcus Rain wasn't a long-time biker. He wasn't a gang member. He wasn't any of the things I'd assumed from his appearance that night at the clinic. He was a quiet man, a pencil pusher at an insurance company, a family man. He had been in the late stages of kidney failure when a donor miraculously appeared, an AB negative match. The donor had been found washed up by a nearby river, nearly drowned and brain dead, with an organ donor card in his wallet. The transplant was immediate, routine, the file said, unremarkable. But what followed wasn't. The investigator's notes were sparse but damning. Marcus's wife claimed he started changing after the surgery. Small things at first. New habits, new preferences, a new temper. He began making reckless decisions, abandoning the quiet stability of his life. A minivan traded for a motorcycle, tattoos that seemed to appear overnight. And then the violence. By the time his wife filed a restraining order, Marcus was unrecognizable, not just in his actions but in his appearance. The file included photos of his tattoos. They were detailed, angular, almost artistic in their precision, but upon closer inspection, I was mistaken. They weren't tattoos at all. They were dark, mottled veins that rooted themselves under his skin, and they matched the ones now growing on my skin, vein by vein, line by line. I stared at the photos for hours trying to make sense of it, trying to feel something that wasn't dread. There is something growing inside me, and it isn't Marcus. I've stopped fighting it. I don't think I can anymore. My body isn't mine. My reflection isn't mine. Even my thoughts feel foreign. Day by day I can feel it spreading. My skin stretches to keep up with the changes. My muscles twist to accommodate my growing frame. Beneath my hair, thick and auburn, I feel bony bumps forming, hard and sharp, pushing against my skull. If anyone finds my body, please. I do not give consent for my organs to be donated. I keep taking the stupid card out of my wallet. But whenever I leave home, a new one appears in my pocket anyway. Putting this online seems to be the only way to get this warning out as quickly as possible. The devil is growing in me. I know it. I've never been afraid to die. It's always been on the horizon for me, and I know I'll be with Henrietta. I just hope she still recognizes me. Do you still need a rug for your home? Good condition and the price is negotiable. call me anytime. That was the first thing I read that morning while still in bed, as I picked up my phone to turn off the alarm. The sender's number wasn't saved in any of my contacts. It was sent at 4 a.m. I assumed I accidentally ended up on some spam list and ignored it, as the apartment I had been living in for the last month was already fully finished. It was annoying, but I had to get ready for work, and these things tend to happen. My workplace was just a short metro trip from the apartment. I lived alone, although my boyfriend Terry was planning to move in with me in a few weeks. My supervisor, waiting for me at the reception area. Unfortunately, for the first day since I got the job, the metro was late. I worked at a consulting firm, and the only other time she had greeted me in the 2 months I worked there was on my first day. Not arriving on time was already not a good impression. Good morning, Monica. I'm afraid to inform you that the meeting we discussed has been scheduled for 11 o'clock. I'll need your report by then. My gut was twisted by anxiety. My report is almost finished. I'll have it on your desk by 11, I said, trying to keep a natural expression. That's great. See you later. The report wasn't exactly almost finished, so I realized I couldn't waste any time. I went straight to my cubicle. There was a pink post-it on the monitor. I still need your answer for tonight. Smiley face. I knew I forgot something. My friend Katie asked if we could have a double date at my place since I live alone. Terry had a night shift, so he didn't reply until this morning. She probably put the post-it before I arrived this morning, as I forgot to reply to her last night. I quickly texted her that we would be there, then put my phone in flight mode to better focus on the report. It wasn't easy, but I managed to finish the report just in time. Lunchtime had already started by the time the meeting was over, so I went time to the cafeteria. Katie was already eating. Hey, I sat at her table. Hey, are you still too busy to answer your phone? She said with a smug expression. Sorry, I forgot to reply, but today I have been really busy. I got late and a rescheduling happened, which nobody told me about until this morning. I'm sorry that you had it rough, so are you and Terrence not coming tonight? We'll be coming. Didn't you see my text? I looked at her confused. What text? I didn't receive anything. I pulled out my phone. It was still in flight mode. I was sure I texted you earlier this morning. Let me check. I got a notification about an unread message. The rug salesman had sent the same message again. Oh, you're right. I accidentally replied to someone else. I kept looking at my phone as I didn't believe it. Given the hurry, I absent-mindedly sent the message to the top contact, which would have been Katie if the unknown number never texted me. I quickly replied that I mistakenly texted him and wasn't interested in any rug, then blocked the contact. Katie laughed. Monica, I told you that you focus too much on work. You should relax more, she said with her mocking smile in full display. But don't worry, drinks are on me tonight. Sure, I let out a small laugh. Just make sure not to throw up in my living room. I remember the last party. We'll be fine. Alex is a good guy. He'll stop me in time. I hope so, at least. The rest of the day was also stressful. Due to the rescheduling, I had way more work piled up than usual. Terry would meet me at home before dinner to help me get the place ready. I had a shower, got changed, and then I browsed social media on my phone waiting for Terry. I noticed I had yet another unread message. It was another message about the rug, the same as the previous ones, but from a different number. This was getting annoying. I just blocked the contact without replying. Terry arrived not long after, bringing the cake. I greeted him with a kiss, and then we started cleaning up. We were talking about our respective work days when my phone buzzed. I expected Katie to tell me she was running late. I exclaimed, slamming my hand on the table. It was another spam message about the rug. What's wrong, honey? Asked Terry, worried about the sudden change in my expression. Sorry, it's been a long day. It seems my number ended up in some spam marketing list, so I have been getting texts all day. It's so annoying. Have you blocked them? Yes, twice. They don't seem to know when to stop. Maybe I should call the police. For what? Spam messaging? Don't bother. Maybe you should just call them and tell them to screw off. Are you serious? Yeah, my sister worked at a call center. You know those about phone plans? She said her contract dictated to try again with the same client until they accepted or got an explicit refusal. I wasn't really in the mood to argue and just wanted to stop it. Alright, but you do it. I handed the phone to Terry. I've had enough for today. He called the number. After a couple of rings, the unknown seller picked up. Hello? Terry's voice was followed by a complete silence. We could only hear faint breathing coming from the other side of the phone. Listen, I'm not interested in any rug. I don't want anything. Stop texting this number. More silence followed. Hello? Are you there? Just stop bothering me. Another 10 seconds of silence later, the other number had hung up. It's probably an automated calling service or something like that. I doubt a real person was even on the other hand. Tried to explain to Terry while I was bringing the tablecloth. You're right. Hopefully, they got the message. I had calmed down and just wanted to look forward to the night. Around 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. Katie and her boyfriend Alex had arrived. She greeted me by handing me a bottle of wine, while Alex followed her with the pizzas. We were about to eat when the doorbell rang again. I looked at Katie, puzzled. Did you invite someone else? No, I thought it was just the four of us tonight, right? She was looking just as puzzled as me. Alex, as he was sitting closest to the door, went to open the door, as I got up from the table. I think it's your order, Monica. Someone must have left it there. He had picked up a sealed cardboard box as he closed the door. I wasn't expecting any package. They probably got the wrong address. But it's your apartment number. This is number 14, isn't it? Alex put the package on the floor. It was a plain cardboard package. The address was correct. I'm sure. I did not order anything recently. Besides, isn't it too late for deliveries? Christmas was in more than a month, and nowhere near close to my birthday. Terry also isn't the kind of guy to randomly make gifts. Katie pat me on the back. Well, maybe you have a secret Santa, although a bit early. Let's see what's inside. As I opened the box, my heart skipped a beat. A blue, cheap-looking rug rolled up, with a red outline inside. What the? This can't be real. I took a step back and looked at Terry, just to confirm that I wasn't hallucinating. He was also astounded. It's just a rug. What's the big deal? Asked Katie, trying to understand my reaction. Terry briefly summed up the story, while I couldn't avoid to look at the package. Maybe there was an error and the automated system sent an order for you instead of... The doorbell rang. Katie still looked confused. Maybe they realized the mistake and came to take the rug back? Terry went to open the door. He looked around and then went back inside. There was nobody. Are there some kids pulling pranks in this building? I don't know, but whatever. Why don't we just get back to the pizzas? We were about to start eating when we heard a couple of knocks, but they weren't from the door. Everybody froze. Terry spoke first after what felt like an eternity. Came from the balcony. We're on the 3rd floor. We couldn't see the balcony from the living room, as it could only be accessed from my bedroom. I'm calling the police. This isn't funny anymore. I picked up my phone. I noticed I had gotten another message. Order accepted from yet another unknown number. I tried not to think about it and dialed 911. My fingers trembling. We heard the doorbell again. We looked at the door as the doorbell kept ringing non-stop. What do you want from us? Screw off, shouted Terry, while the knock on the balcony had resumed. 911, what is your emergency? A relief hit me as the operator picked up the phone. Someone's trying to get inside my apartment. We don't know who they are. Please help us. What's the address of the... The call was cut short as the lights went out. Everything was pitch black aside from the light from my phone, which had lost reception. Something shifted in the dark. "Stay away from the door." Terry and Alex had moved in front of me and Katie, grabbing kitchen knives from the table. Not long after, Katie's phone illuminated the dark room. The front door was still closed, as well as the door to my bedroom that faced the balcony. The cardboard box, however, had been moved. The rug had been laid out on the floor and was no longer rolled up. "What the... There is someone else in there. Monica, call 911. I hit the recall button, my fingers still trembling. The reception, it's still gone. I could feel my heartbeat shooting up. "Try with mine." Terry handed me his phone. I tried calling again and again while we stood in the darkness. "It's not working either. Katie, try with your phone, please." All right." Katie pointed her phone downwards as the darkness engulfed us. We couldn't hear anything else but ourselves as the doorbell and the banging noises from the balcony seemed to have stopped. "I've got no reception either. Alex, try it as well." Alex also pulled out his phone. "Same for my phone. What do we do? Should we try making a run for it?" "We have to try. Terry, what do you think?" We could only hear his breathing as Terry didn't reply. "Terry?" I asked, grabbing his arm. Except that was not Terry. What I just touched felt rough, like sandpaper or rusty metal. I screamed, dropping my phone. Then the lights came back. I felt reassured when I didn't see any stranger in the room and could still see Alex and Katie's faces. As our eyes adjusted to the sudden lights, the terror returned, magnified. Blood had been splattered everywhere on the floor, with a trail leading to the door to my bedroom now ajar. Katie and Alex also screamed. Terry was missing. Oh my god, Monica, we have to get out of here." I ignored her and was about to go to the bedroom, determined to look for Terry. "Now, let's go." Alex grabbed my arm and pulled me to the front door, still closed. I stumbled on the cardboard box while looking at the bedroom door. As I looked down, my eyes filled with tears. Inside the box was a severed arm drenched in blood. A piece of a shirt was still attached to the arm, and it looked exactly like what Terry was wearing. I rushed outside the apartment screaming. The neighbors had already called 911 due to the noise. The police questioned us and searched the whole building with no results. When they were done, it was late at night and I couldn't return to the apartment. I did not want to return after what happened, and Katie asked me to spend the night at her place. I was heartbroken and couldn't stop crying. Alex and Katie tried to comfort me, and I could feel they were also shaken. I told them they could go to bed, wishing good night. It's no surprise that I couldn't sleep that night. I tried to close my eyes, but it reminded me too much of the darkness from earlier. I tried to watch TV to not think about it, but I couldn't forget. I must not forget. So I started writing this down, hoping to finally fall asleep. I had been asleep for a couple of hours at most when I was awoken by a notification sound. After checking, it didn't come from mine. I noticed Katie had left her phone on the couch after going to sleep. I was about to move it out of the way when I gasped. I couldn't help but read the received message. "Do you still need a rug for your home? Great condition, and the price is negotiable. Call me anytime." My dad has always been a hunter. Even now at his ripe old age of 56, he still tries to go out, lay traps, hunt squirrels, and even takes in other hunters' kills and butchers them, most of the time for a payment of only meat. He doesn't do much deer or bear hunting anymore, but on a good day, you'll catch him in the woods on his side-by-side, looking up in the trees for a squirrel, or chasing a raccoon out of its hole. Selling the meat or hide hardly grants any money for the time it takes to hunt, kill, prepare, and ultimately cure the hide, but my dad still does it. I think it's because he's done it all his life. and it has slowly become a routine, a ritual, a need. If he's not occupying his time, then he's doing nothing, and in his mind, doing nothing is how you die. These days, my dad isn't very fit. He's older, he's weaker, and he damn near can't walk anymore. But you will still catch him out in the woods, rifle in his hand, knife on his belt, and a fresh kill or two in the back of his side-by-side. Although I think that is subject to change now. Everything is going to change now. A few days after Christmas and into the new year, we received a package from UPS. I was surprised it was even delivered because there was over 8 inches of snow on the ground. The snow wouldn't stop for another 2 days after this either. I checked my Amazon account and found that yes, it indeed was meant to be delivered that day. I just didn't receive the notification. It was good news anyway. The Christmas present I ordered from my dad had finally arrived, a week and some change after Christmas. I was excited to present it to him, as he had never owned one in his life. An infrared scope. Night vision. I opened it. I made sure it worked really quick in my room, put it back in its packaging, and presented it to my dad. "Son, this is amazing. You want to go outside and test it?" He was beaming. My gift was definitely better than the $2 watch my brother had gotten my dad. "Yes, sir. I'll slip on my boots real quick. Frankie, you come too." My brother Frankie began pulling on his full snow gear. I, who run hot as a furnace most of the time, just slipped on a jacket and my boots. My dad did the same. We opened the main door, then the screen door leading to our back porch, which bordered the woods almost directly. The screen door creaked, then slammed shut as the springs kicked it into overdrive. In single file, we marched down the steps, my dad holding on to the infrared scope with the delicacy of holding a chicken egg. He put it up to his eyeball, lifting his glasses up as he did so, and toggled the infrared function on them. He bellowed out in laughter. "I'll be. This is incredible, son." He scanned the tree line over and over. He noted a squirrel in one of the trees closest to him. A bird, finch of some kind, he said, in a bush a little further away. And then he stopped dead, frozen momentarily. "What is that?" "What is it, Dad?" Frankie spoke up, nearly shouting. "Quiet, quiet." My dad started speaking in a whisper and hunkered down. We both did the same. "Dad?" I whispered back at him nearly a minute later. He was still staring off into the edge of the forest. "Let me see." Reluctant to take his eye off whatever had caught his attention, but knowing I had the second most experience in the woods among us, and knowing that if anyone were to identify an unknown animal, it would probably be me, he handed me the infrared scope. Looking through it was awesome. Everything was immediately bright, and I could make out probably 100, maybe even 200 or more feet into the woods. It wasn't exactly in true focus. As focused as I could get was probably, to put it in a term most of you can understand, 480p quality, like a video shot on an older camera. I scanned the tree line, looking for whatever my dad saw, but seeing nothing. Then, movement. Something shaking in the woods, at the very edge of focus on the infrared scope. "It's eating." I found myself whispering this to my dad. "A deer, I know, but what is it?" "Frankie, go get Dad's rifle. Now." "Let me see." I cut him off with a wave of my hand. He's only 11 and has never been good at whispering. "Now, Frankie. The 45-70, not the 30-30. Load it, cock it, and bring it quietly." Frankie got up and moved into the house without another word. He was smart enough to not let the door creak and slam like we so carelessly did coming out there. "I have no idea what the hell that is, Dad." The thing in the woods was covered in blood. The thick fur on its neck and shoulders were clearly matted, wet with the blood of the deer. I dared to move closer. 5 feet, 10, then 15. The image getting clearer and clearer as I went. 30 feet closer, and I could see the unnatural bend in the thing's knees. I could see the 3 long claws digging into the flesh of the deer. I could see its snout, which I didn't notice before, ripping apart the flesh in its hands. Its ears were pointy and long, its body wide and muscular, almost like a werewolf, but not like in the movies. There was nothing human about this beast. It was more like a mutant wolf. Something born from a wolf, of which my state has none, and turned into a creature that stood, as far as I could tell, 8 feet off the ground. And that was on all fours. Its spine was curved like a scared cat, hunched over eating its food, yet much like a raccoon, it used its hands to eat. Fur did not cover its legs or head, just the neck and torso. As it moved to reposition itself on the other side of the deer, I heard the screen door close softly behind me. I didn't dare look away from the beast. Its eyes were mere slits in its face. The sockets themselves looked completely empty, and what little hair it did have on its head was long, thin, stringy, and waving back and forth as it shook the blood from its matted neck fur. It licked and cleaned itself slowly, then went back to the deer, continuing its feast. Frankie reached Dad, and Dad passed the rifle to me in the dark. My dad's lever-action 45-70 had a scope attached to it, but this infrared scope could also be mounted in front of the normal scope already on the gun. I shoved it on, took the Allen wrench that was stuck directly on the scope itself and tightened it down. I knew the scope was sighted in just last week, so I hoped it would be accurate. I trusted that Frankie had cocked the gun inside like I told him. I aimed at the beast, held my breath, and fired. The trigger clicked in my hand. It was loud. My idiot brother cocked the gun before loading it. There wasn't a round in the chamber. I had dry fired, and it was loud. The wolf thing in the wood's ears pointed straight up, flicked around, and then it looked right at me, baring its crooked, sharp teeth. I held a scream and cocked the rifle, successfully putting a round in the chamber. The thing was barreling toward me, running at speeds I have never seen anything that big before. It leaped and bounded its way effortlessly through the woods, directly at me. It too had infrared. There was and still is no doubt in my mind. It could see me, and I could see it. The wolf thing's eyes opened wide, and so did its mouth. They were in fact empty, completely. I suppose you don't need pupils when you see an infrared. Sensors or something. I guess. Inside those black, lifeless sockets. It sprang from the ground a great leap from nearly 20 feet away, heading right toward me. I pulled the trigger and a deafening boom rang my ears. If any of you have fired such a weapon, you know how loud they are. Deafening is an understatement. As I could hear a very high-pitched ringing and nothing else, the thud from the gun on my shoulder knocked my face, more importantly my eye, away from the infrared scope. I quickly cocked the gun, placed my face against the scope, and looked through the infrared again. It was gone. I hit it, maybe only nicked it, but it was gone. In the snow I could see tracks leading away, and a few drops of blood following them. God, I hope I killed it, and I hope it was the only one. My dad has been up every night since, in his rocking chair, 45-70 in his lap, infrared scope in hand, looking out the back window, and eyeing the tree line. I don't think he or I will be going into the woods ever again. I can't stop thinking about the Oracle. The memory of that day has corrupted my every thought. On good days, I might be able to stop thinking long enough to eat or change clothes before the anxiety cripples me back into submission. Today is not a good day. A lot of days are not good days. So if these are the thoughts I'm stuck with, then they're the ones all right. I had just moved away to start college. My mind was filled with what ifs. What if I get lost on campus? What if I don't like my classes? What if I can't make friends? but after a couple of weeks my nerves subsided as I got settled into my new routine. It was a sleepy little college town surrounded by a sea of yellow cornfields and family farms. The people were nice enough, and, on the surface, I had nothing to complain about. Until a couple weeks in when I noticed the whispering. Initially, I wrote it off. I assumed it was just people whispering about me being new to the area, and that as the semester went on, I'd become more than just the new girl. But it didn't stop. Even well into my first semester, people who I thought of as friends, or at least classmates, still whispered to each other whenever I was around. I know what they kept whispering now. From the day I arrived, the question on everyone's lips was, has she met the Oracle? I first learned of her from a note that was snuck into my backpack. It was a yellow index card that said, "The Oracle would like to see your future." It listed a New Drexel address, a time and date, and then said, "Bring an offering." I thought it was some weird small-town joke. After I had found the note, the whispers turned their questions to me. I couldn't walk into a room without at least one person seeing me, briskly walking over, and then whispering in my ear excitedly, "Have you gone yet?" Or, "Have you met her?" They were so eager to talk about her. One told me that he got winning lottery numbers from her. Another left his day job to start his own company, because she saw it in his future. Another met her now husband because of the Oracle. All success stories, all happy endings. I was skeptical. It was all so weird. I told myself I wouldn't go, but whether it came from curiosity or boredom, one Friday night I found myself taking endless lefts and rights through the back roads lined with cornfields. In my passenger seat I had the now worn-out index card with the address and a brand new family-size package of Oreos. No one would tell me what kind of offering an Oracle would want, but who doesn't like Oreos? I'm not sure what I expected, but it wasn't what I found. Pulling up to the address, I took a long dirt path surrounded by trees that gave way to a large clearing where two double-wide trailer homes sat, private and hidden. The yard was a mess of old and new. An old plastic slide and playhouse were faded from years out in the elements. Yet next to them was a brand new playground structure made of beautiful dark wood. The green plastic slide looked shiny and inviting, and the swings were pristine with their chains clanging softly in the breeze. I turned my attention to the houses. Between them was an awning in which two cars sat parked, a beat-up Jeep Wrangler and a sporty-looking BMW. Before I noticed her, she was in front of me, holding out a hand to shake. She was a younger girl. We must have been around the same age. She wore a dirty work shirt and stained overalls. Brown hair lied braided behind her back. Brown eyes looked up at me expectantly, waiting for me to shake her hand. I was about to explain myself and tell her that I was looking for the Oracle, but she cut me off before I could open my mouth. "Hi, Elise. I'm Alex, but you've probably heard of me as the Oracle. Nice to finally meet you." Wordlessly, I shook her hand. "Come inside. You can sit on the couch while I freshen up. We'll be in the left house," she said, and without any further discussion, she turned and began walking away. I followed her, but before I got to the door, she turned and said, "Don't forget the Oreos. Double stuff is my favorite." When I walked in, I was greeted by a small, cozy home. To the left was the kitchen, and to the right was a small dining room table, old and worn, with beat-up chairs to match. Walking past the table, I found the living room, furnished with luxury couches that were almost too big to fit the space. I sat and was faced with a large television that was nearly the size of the wall it hung on. I heard the shower running. It acted as brown noise, as my mind began to wander. I thought about how strange it all was. Some girl living all the way out here can see the future. I didn't believe her. Not at first. Even though she knew my name. I explained that away. I assumed one of the whisperers had told her. I hadn't told anyone about the Oreos, but eventually I figured that she had seen them in the passenger seat of my car. A loud tearing noise pulled me from my thoughts. I realized she was in the kitchen now, opening up the package of cookies. The shower was off. I don't know how long it had been off, but it was off. She was dressed in a different outfit of t-shirt and overalls, cleaner but still stained with dirt and car grease. Her hair was dry. "So," I began, but I wasn't sure what to say. I remember being thankful that she cut me off again. "Hey, sorry to leave you sitting there. I knew you would be here sometime, but I didn't know when." "How did you know I would come here at all?" "I saw it," she said simply. The words hung in the air for a beat, then another. "You have questions, I'm sure. They always do. Would you sit with me? I can explain what I know," she said, motioning to the beat-up dining table. I remember I was unsure about whether I should sit down. I had thought about just leaving, that this was just some scam, but then I blinked and I was sat facing her. A large candle sat between us with a lid on top. She was speaking about something and must have been deep in thought. Her eyes didn't meet mine as she continued on. "Like I said, I don't get to control what I see or how far. Without anyone, I only get dreams. Fragments of thousands of futures that I can rarely make sense of. But when I have someone else here, I can see into the future through them. That's why I love new guests. Now the visions are a sure thing. Fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it. It's fixed. It's just yet to be lived." She paused for a moment, then made eye contact with me again. "Sorry if I was rambling. Does that answer your question?" "I'm not sure," was all I could say. "You must be feeling a little disoriented, but that's normal. It's this property. The land has something about it. Feels like you're in a fog sometimes. Can I get you some water or anything?" I remember this moment. It fills me with regret, anger, resentment. I don't know when she started talking or how much I missed, but I was sure that something was wrong. I don't remember sitting down. I didn't remember asking her a question. I felt high. I felt so far from anything real sitting at that crappy table. And I meant to tell her. I meant to say that I felt ill, that I had cold feet, that I needed to leave. I opened my mouth. The words started. And then the blinds were closed and the room was dark. The candle flickered as our only light. We held hands above the table together like a seance. She was telling me to look deeply into her eyes and only into her eyes. We both sat leaning forward. She stared into my eyes and I stared into hers. The candlelight flickered. She bore into me with intensity. Her brown eyes looked darker in the candlelight. I was waiting. My lungs burned and I realized I had been holding my breath. I exhaled and waited. Another moment passed. Then the room began to glow. It was soft at first, an orange light that draped gently over the room. I looked around for the source. To my surprise, the candlelight was merely a whisper, and the blinds were still drawn. "Look at me. I can't see unless you look into my eyes," the oracle reprimanded. I looked back at her and her eyes emanated a faint orange light. "Look deeper," she instructed. I obeyed. Her irises had changed from a common brown into something more. The orange became brighter, warmer. I heard birds singing. I felt the wind blowing. Everything was calm, serene. Her eyes were an early summer morning. They turned a shade of green, and I heard the leaves rustling in the breeze. It was all brighter now, hotter. She stared at me with suns for eyes. I strained to keep my eyes open, but I felt compelled to look harder. I saw the clear blue sky of a summer's day, and then that blue gave way to purples and pinks as I watched the sun set. The night came and her eyes twinkled with starlight. We were bathed in the light of a harvest moon. I watched the stars turn until the room began to glow orange again. Days passed in those eyes, then weeks, and then months. I stared into those kaleidoscope eyes and I watched the seasons pass. The colors danced around the room, gaining speed. I watched the storms gather, dark, foreboding grays that swirled with intensity and power. Lightning flashed in her sockets, and I smelt the rain. I was enamored when she reached the autumn months. The room shone brilliant shades of brown, yellow, and red, and we were buried in the falling leaves. I was lost in the flashing lights of a life I've yet to live. Until suddenly, it stopped. I found myself at the beat-up dining room table again. I was holding the hands of a stranger with a faint candle lit between us. We were both standing out of our chairs and leaning forward to see each other better. She looked into my eyes, and I looked into hers. Her eyes were plain and brown and gripped with fear. "Well, what did you see?" I ventured to ask. My question seemed to pull her back into the moment with me. She threw my hands down as if she were surprised to still be holding them, and began to back away from me into the wall. The oracle held her hands to her eyes, covering her face. From behind her hands I heard a pleading whisper. "No, no, 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 no." "What did you see?" was all I could ask. She slammed her hands on the table and began to scream "no" over and over. There were tears in her eyes. Without warning, she had exploded into hysterics. I was frozen, stunned, too stunned in that moment to speak to her, as she took her first 2 fingers on each hand and began to gouge out her own eyes, all the while still screaming "no." She fell to the ground, screaming in defiance. What was left of her eyes hung out of her sockets, and blood stained her face, her clothes, and especially her hands. She was sobbing. I began to approach her. I wanted to help her. I wanted to take her to a hospital. And selfishly, somewhere deep down, I needed to know what she saw. But I never got the chance. A harsh yellow light burst from her now empty eye sockets. It hummed with intensity and poured over me like a nuclear blast. The oracle sprung to her feet and screamed out in horror. "Oh God, I can still see it!" Without another word, she grabbed the table firmly with both hands and bashed her head against it. Everything around me drowned in the light. Explosions of yellow rattled me with each impact. She screamed and slammed her head again. My skin burned. Slam. My teeth ached with every sickening hit. Slam. Something cracked loudly. My eyes failed me. I saw only yellow. All-encompassing yellow. She screamed out again, a cry of terror, and with a final slam, the light was gone as quickly as it came. The oracle lied dead, an eyeless mess of fear and gore. In every sunrise, in every storm, in every clear sky, I see her ever-changing eyes watching me. At night, when everything is still, I hear my heartbeat pounding away like a skull cracking against wood. And when sleep does finally take me, I see the yellow whispering to me about impossible things that are yet to be. They say only 30 to 50% of people have an inner monologue, that half the world walks around with nothing but silence in their skulls. Empty, quiet. I pity them. My inner voice isn't just some background noise. It's everything. It's sharper than my instincts, smarter than my decisions. It's the reason I've gotten this far in life. The quiet ones, they're animals, reacting, not thinking. Me? I'm a symphony. Always in motion, always calculating. I love it. I love me. That's what I was thinking as I tied up my skates that day. The rink was alive with noise, blades scraping, laughter bouncing off the boards, cold air licking my skin. I was there with Hannah, this girl I'd been seeing for a few weeks. She was sweet, steady on her feet, better on the ice than me, but too kind to show it. My voice kept pace with every moment. Don't trip, smile when she talks, hold her hand, but let her lead the rhythm. It's like having a coach and a confidant rolled into one. Who needs God when you've got your own mind? And then it happened. A stray kid tore across the ice, cutting too loose, and I stumbled to dodge him. My legs went out from under me, my head snapping against the frozen floor like a broken spring. For a moment there was only impact, sharp and hot, then silence. Not just around me, but inside. When I came back to myself, Hannah was helping me to my feet, asking if I was okay. I nodded and the voice returned, but it wasn't the same. "Get up, you useless prick," it said. I froze. My voice didn't talk like that. It never had. It had always been calm, measured, not this barking, snarling thing. I wanted to brush it off, blame the fall, but the words stuck to me like tar. I skated the rest of the evening in a fog, the voice muttering in the back of my skull. Cruel things, ugly things. "You're boring her. Say something or she'll leave. Not that it matters. She's out of your league anyway." When I argued back, it laughed. Not a kind laugh, a raw, raspy one. Over the next few days, the voice grew louder. It stopped offering advice and started barking orders. My body and brain felt like a house with a new tenant, a violent, unwelcome one. Standing in line at the deli, it whispered in my mind, "Take the knife from the counter. Hold it. Feel its weight." While walking down the street, it suggested, "Push that man into traffic. See what happens." I didn't obey, but I couldn't ignore it. Every time I refused, it grew angrier. "You're pathetic. A worm. A waste of flesh." I decided to see a doctor. Hannah suggested it after I told her I'd been off since the fall. I didn't tell her about the voice, just enough to make it seem like I wasn't losing my mind. The voice hated the idea. "You think they'll help you? You think pills or therapy will make me go away? I'm not going anywhere, you idiot. I'm you." I kept the appointment. I had to. But on the day as I walked to the clinic, the voice became relentless, screaming now, its words twisting in my head like jagged metal. "Turn around. Don't do this. If you walk in there, I'll make you pay." I pushed on, teeth gritted, until I reached the street outside the office. I saw the doctor through the window, her waiting room calm and sterile. For a moment I thought I'd made it, that I could finally get this thing out of me. Then the voice snapped. "If you won't listen, I'll find another way." And suddenly my body wasn't mine. I felt my feet moving, my hands reaching. There was a man passing by, an older guy with a briefcase and a distracted look on his face. The voice roared. My hands latched onto his throat. His eyes went wide, bloodshot, panicked. I felt the cartilage in his neck shift under my grip. A primal, sickening crunch. The body hit the pavement with a dull thud. For a moment, everything was still. And then the voice chuckled, low and satisfied. "Good boy. That's more like it." Sirens wailed in the distance. I didn't run. I couldn't. The voice wasn't worried. It whispered, soft and smug. "I told you, you can't get rid of me. Now we'll have plenty of time together. Just you, me, and a cage. Doesn't that sound cozy?" I work maintenance. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Usually my jobs are at office buildings, warehouses, maybe a shopping mall. But 3 months ago I was hired for a government contract in the middle of nowhere. No address, just coordinates. When I got there, it looked like a military bunker built into the side of a mountain. The entrance was a massive steel door, unmarked except for a tiny keypad. A man in a black suit greeted me. No name, no smile, just a clipboard and a pen. "Sign here. No phones, no questions. Follow orders." I signed. The pay was insane, and I figured it was just some secret government R&D lab. How bad could it be? I regret everything. Inside, the facility was pristine and sterile, lit by an endless stretch of fluorescent lights. I was given a uniform, a small ID badge that only said Tier 1 Maintenance, and a list of protocols longer than the US Constitution. Many of my tasks were mundane: replace broken air filters, tighten bolts on high-pressure pipes, sweep up debris in the lower levels. But the deeper I went, the weirder it got. Sublevels 1 through 3 were straightforward: labs, living quarters, storage. But sublevel 4? That's when the rules started showing up. The first rule I noticed was posted at the door: do not speak to the staff on this floor unless they speak to you first. The scientists on sublevel 4 were pale, jittery, and avoided eye contact. They whispered to each other in quick, frantic bursts and moved like they were afraid of being watched. There was a room I had to clean there. Room 401. The rule for that one specific: never turn off the lights while inside. Room 401 was empty, just white walls and a metal table. Easy enough to clean, but the moment I stepped in, I felt like I was being watched. There was nothing in the room, no cameras, no vents, no windows, but the feeling was undeniable. And then the lights flickered. Just for a second, but in that split second, I swear I saw a shadow standing in the corner. When the light stabilized, it was gone. I finished my work in record time and didn't look back. By my second month, I noticed the air was heavier the deeper you went. Sublevel 6 felt like breathing underwater. The signs outside the doors were increasingly ominous. Emergency protocol, alpha only. Extreme hazard, class D entities. And my personal favorite, do not enter without clearance or armed escort. One night I was called to fix a coolant leak on sublevel 7. I didn't even know there was a sublevel 7 until that moment. My escort, a pair of armed guards with rifles I didn't recognize, didn't say a word to me as we descended in the elevator. When the doors opened, I instantly wanted to leave. The hallway was freezing and the walls were covered in frost despite the humming of industrial heaters. The lights were dimmer here, casting long, flickering shadows. We stopped at a door marked the Atrium. Stay inside the yellow lines, one of the guards said. It was the first time anyone had spoken to me that day. Inside, the room was massive, like a stadium flipped upside down. At the center was a huge glass enclosure filled with a glowing blue mist. Pipes and wires snaked around it like veins. I couldn't see what was inside the mist, but I could hear it. Low, rhythmic thuds, like a heartbeat. My job was simple: replace a cracked coolant pipe attached to the enclosure. I tried not to think about the fact that the pipe was pumping something into the glass, not out of it. While I worked, the mist began to shift. Something massive was moving inside. I saw an outline, like a figure pressed against frosted glass. At first it looked human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But then it moved again and I realized it was far too tall, its limbs too long, its proportions all wrong. The guards tensed, gripping their rifles. One of them muttered, "It's awake." That's when the alarms went off. The room flooded with red light and a deafening klaxon echoed off the walls. The mist inside the glass spun violently and the figure slammed against the enclosure. The glass cracked, not a little, but a long, jagged fissure that stretched across its surface. "Fix the pipe now," one of the guards shouted. I froze, watching as the thing inside the mist pressed its head, or what I thought was its head, against the glass. It had no face, just a smooth, featureless surface, but I could feel it looking at me. The glass cracked again and a low, guttural moan filled the room. It wasn't coming from the alarm or the guards. It was coming from inside my head. Words formed, not spoken, but injected directly into my mind. "Let me out. I will make you more than human." I stumbled back, clutching my ears. The guards opened fire, their bullets tearing through the mist but doing nothing to the thing inside. The glass shattered and the mist poured out, filling the room. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the figure stepping free of the enclosure, its limbs twisted unnaturally, like it was trying to decide what shape to take. I woke up in the infirmary 2 days later. My contract was terminated on the spot, and I was escorted out of the facility by men in hazmat suits. They didn't answer my questions, just handed me an envelope with a check and a warning. Speak about this, and we'll find you. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been having episodes. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night, standing in my backyard with no memory of how I got there. Other times I'll hear whispers in the back of my mind, promising things, power, knowledge, immortality. 2 nights ago I found frost on my bedroom window. It was 80 degrees outside. Last night I woke up to find my reflection staring at me from the mirror. Even though I wasn't moving, it smiled. I don't know what they're doing at that facility, but I know one thing. They didn't contain it. The atrium is open now and it's looking for me. And if you hear a voice in your head that isn't yours, don't listen. It doesn't want to help you. It just wants to get out. This happened 4 days ago, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I'm never coming back to the village again. I was staying with my grandma in a small Japanese village while taking a break from the city. It's a quiet place surrounded by mountains and dense forests, and though I visited before, it always feels a bit eerie at night. My grandma is a firm believer in old traditions and superstitions such as yokai. One of her biggest warnings was to never whistle after dark. She used to say it invites Yanaki-sama, the night caller. I always thought it was just one of those creepy stories meant to keep kids from staying out late. But now I know it's not. That night, I had gone into town for an important Japanese festival. I stayed later than I'd planned, and by the time I started walking back to my grandma's house, it was pitch black. The village doesn't have street lights, and my phone's flashlight was barely enough to light the road. To calm myself, I started whistling, just a cheerful tune to break the silence. Almost immediately I heard it, a whistle coming from the trees. It mimicked my tune exactly. I froze. I knew there shouldn't have been anyone else out there. The road was empty and the forest was too dense for someone to move quietly. Trying to brush it off, I whistled again, this time out of nervousness. The reply came faster, closer, and somehow sharper, like the sound was cutting through the air. I felt my chest tighten as I realized this wasn't an echo. I picked up my pace, but the whistling followed me. It stayed the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I walked. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. That's when I heard it above me. I looked up and my stomach dropped. Against the faint line of the stars, I saw something. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its limbs stretched out like a broken puppet suspended in the air. Its head was playfully tilted to one side, almost curiously, and it swayed gently, like it was waiting for me to do something. I don't know how I managed to move, but I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding. When I finally reached my grandma's house, I slammed the door shut and locked every window and door. For a moment I thought I was safe. Then I heard it. The whistling started again, this time right outside the house. "Keiko-chan," a soft voice called, mimicking my grandma's tone. "Come outside. Let me in." I didn't respond. I didn't even breathe. The voice grew more insistent, the whistling shriller, and then I heard a creak from the corner of the room. I turned slowly, and there it was. That thing had followed me inside. It unfolded itself from the shadows, its long limbs stretching and its head tilting toward me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. Then out of sheer desperation, I remembered something my grandma had said earlier. Light always chases away the dark. My hands shook as I grabbed a small lantern on the table and lit it. The flame flickered, casting a warm glow around the room. As soon as the light touched the creature, it let out this horrible, piercing whistle, like a train screeching to a halt. It writhed and shrank back, dissolving into the shadows until it was gone. The next morning I told my grandma everything. She nodded solemnly and handed me a small wooden talisman she had carved. She told me it was meant to keep Yanaki-sama away, but warned me to never whistle at night again. I've kept the talisman on me ever since. I haven't heard the whistling again, but at night, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can feel something watching me from the shadows. If you are ever in a small village in Japan, heed the warning, and whatever you do, don't whistle after dark. You never know who's listening. When I was 10 years old, my brother came home to die on a frigid day in January. Purple lesions ravaged the skin that barely covered his bones. He looked an awful lot like a skeleton, unlike the friendly visitor I had come to know over my short lifetime. My brother Tobias was many years older than me, so I didn't have much of a relationship with him. Still, he made a point to take the train home to New Haven for the holidays, filling our living room with plenty of gifts. One evening, he bought Mom the Fendi baguette she always wanted to show off to her friends at the Junior Women's Club. For my dad's gift, he purchased the George Foreman grill, and all his co-workers at the office buzzed about it. For me, he bought a creepy crawler's oven with liquid and mold containers. The last time he came home, I was excited to show him all the bugs and monsters I made. "You better not," my mom said solemnly when I came home from school one day. My arms were filled with the new batch of miniature reptiles and amphibians I had created. They were a big hit at recess, and I knew Tobias would love them. "He's super tired, honey." "I thought they would cheer Toby up." She shook her head and sobbed, drawing a handkerchief to her face. "Honey, we talked about this. Toby is very sick. He won't be able to hear you now." My mom sobbed loudly as my dad slung an arm around her, directing her down the hallway. "Devin, your grandparents are in the living room. Why don't you join them?" These words caused my mom to weep even louder for some reason as my dad ushered her away. As they reached the living room, I heard the faint words of the live-in hospice nurse that it wouldn't be long now, and something about hearing the death rattle. When the sobs faded and the conversation died down, I turned the knob to his room as quietly as I could. Standing in the doorway, my heart fluttered. My brother not only looked like a skeleton with his frail exterior and dissolving skin, but like one of the gray aliens I made in my creepy crawler's oven a couple weeks ago. Unlike the alien, however, he had several tubes attached to him that were hooked up to boxy, beeping machines. His body looked so thin that I swear it started to fade into the sheets of his bed. "Toby?" I said hoarsely. I waited for a few minutes before I shouted his name. "Toby!" Minutes passed before his purple lips quivered and let out an audible groan that dragged on for several seconds. After the groan ended, 6 booming words escaped his lips. "Look for me on the walls." A longer groan ensued these words, followed by a long beep from the machine. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as the nurse, my parents, and grandparents rushed into the room. I don't remember much except for shuffling feet, screams, and my father whisking me out of the room and closing the door in my face. The adults were in the room for several minutes before my grandmother finally left with her head cast down. She threw her doughy arms around me and said, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Your brother's gone to heaven with the angels." As the other adults came out of the room one by one to hug me, apologize, and sob into my small body, I wondered if I should be crying too. I suppose I loved my brother, but I didn't know him well. To me, he was just that friendly visitor who bought me gifts and read me stories. He popped in and out of my life like some magical elf, that appeared only for holidays and disappeared like Santa up the chimney or Frosty the Snowman on a sunny day. I put my hands over my eyes and pretended to cry with them. After a while, I asked if it was okay to go up to my room. My parents permitted me. At once, I hurried up the stairs and slammed the door behind me. For hours, I plopped onto my dinosaur bed sheets and stared at the walls. I stared at the walls for so long that I thought my eyes would bleed. The walls of my room were sponge-painted blue, covered in posters of my favorite baseball players and movies. The shapes on my walls were unmoving. As my eyes drew tears and I yawned, I started to drift off to sleep. My room didn't have any windows, so I couldn't tell whether it was nighttime or not, but I suppose night was nearing by the increasing shadows in the room. Something was strange about these shadows, though. They weren't the typical black or gray, but shades of green. I blinked as green circles danced around my walls like a stage spotlight. "Are you awake, Devi boy?" A hollow voice echoed. "It's time to wake up, Devi boy." "Huh?" I said, rubbing my eyes. Who are you?" "You know who, silly. I don't have much time." I blinked twice and the green circles faded together. All at once the circles morphed into the shape of a human. The shape looked a little under 6 feet tall, perhaps taller, its figure reaching the brim of the ceiling. "Toby? Toby, is that you?" "Who else, Devi boy?" The figure let out a bellowing laugh and stretched atop the ceiling, twisting around the fan in almost a rhythmic pattern. "But I thought you were... dead?" The figure unleashed another bellowing laugh, this time twisting onto the carpeted floor, its green glow matching the soda I spilled the previous day. "I thought I would die too, Devi boy, but it's the most unusual thing. You don't go to heaven or hell like we learned in church. Don't tell Mom and Dad, though, especially not Grandma." "I won't," I said, scratching my head. "But Toby, if you're not dead, what are you?" "Hiding." The figure's voice changed from a bellowing pitch to a dull whisper. What do you mean?" "You must swear not to tell anyone." "I swear, Toby, I swear." "People don't die," the figure whispered, draining from the carpets back to a small circle on my wall. "They hide." "From what?" "I don't know yet," the figure said, its voice now trembling. "I just know that we're hiding. We're all hiding." As the figure spoke those words, I saw dozens of green circles bouncing around my walls. They were varying shades of green. Some spoke in whispers like my brother. Others spoke in gibberish that sounded like different languages. I shoved my thumbs into my ear canals as the sounds grew louder and more varied. I jammed my eyelids shut as the lights flickered and burned into my retinas. As I screamed, I heard my brother's voice once more. "People don't die. They hide, Devi. They hide and they must never be found." I screamed so loud that my cat Jasper hollered from the other room. I screamed so loud that my mom, dad, and grandparents, and even the live-in nurse hurried upstairs and forced their way into my room. "It's okay, honey," my mom said, pulling me into her bosom. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're all so sad." As the others crowded around me, I continued to scream. Though the sounds had disappeared, I still heard my brother's voice loud and clear. "People don't die. They hide." As the days faded into weeks and months, I saw the green circles everywhere, bouncing about the side of buildings, circling the screens of the downtown movie theater, and even on the fence of my backyard. Sometimes the circles morphed into the shapes of humans. Other times they looked like mere reflections. One time during a sleepover, I swore I even saw the circles morph into the shapes of falling bats on the outsides of my tent. I tried not to scream when I saw them. After a while, I tried not to look. When I didn't look, however, I heard their whispers, which usually amounted to nothing but gibberish. As the months faded into years, I checked myself into therapy. the only chance I had to stop seeing the circles, to stop hearing the awful, muffled voices. As a college student, my campus therapist surmised that the shapes and whispers were my way of coping with loss and grief. He assured me that people truly did die, and even took me to the local morgue, which his cousin owned, to show me what a corpse looked like. I admitted that I had never seen my brother's corpse when he died. Seeing the corpses of an old woman and a man as skinny as my brother made me realize how natural death was a part of life. I kept in touch with my therapist after college, and with each passing day, I began to hear the voices even less. For the first time in forever, I could appreciate the sounds of the outdoors that I had taken for granted, even the menial ones like a gust of wind or a child screaming on the playground. For the first time in forever, I could appreciate the laughter of Julia, the girl I took on a first date at the local Starbucks. I loved the sound of her laughter, the sounds of her laughter as we engaged in the silliest conversations. Throughout my life, I heard many wonderful sounds like church bells on my wedding day, or the sound of my son Jack crying in my arms. I fell in love with the lights and sounds of my life until the day I started to cough profusely. My wife had taken Jack to daycare as I sat in my home office, typing a draft of my latest article. I felt the urge to cough, a large, bulging urge rising from my chest. As much as I tried to ignore it, I finally unleashed the cough, a cough so powerful that I doubled over onto my desk, spilling blood onto the keyboard. I began to shiver as the blood dripped from my mouth onto the keys and all over the floor. I scrambled to find my cell phone and dial 911. As I continued to convulse, blood, and cry, after I had emptied all of the contents of blood from my stomach, I collapsed onto the floor with the receiver by my ear. 911, what's your emergency? With what little strength I had left, I pushed my body across the floor to the phone. I threw up a lot of blood, I said weakly. Sorry about that, sir, the dispatcher said. Many moments passed before she spoke again. Hello? Are you there? Sir? The dispatcher said, her voice suddenly a lot lower and more muffled. You better start thinking about a good place to hide. As the voice began to cackle, a swarm of green circles danced around my body. The padding of the gurney is small comfort against the oppressive chill of the operating theater. Two surgeons lean over me. They have already introduced themselves as Dr. Michaels and Dr. McCarthy. Their impeccable bedside manner does much to ease my anxieties. Dr. Michaels softly grasps the back of my hand and applies an antiseptic wipe. You will feel a sharp scratch. His warning arrives overdue as the needle has already pierced my skin, as this is partly an open surgery to correct the hernia, and partly exploratory to address the concerns we found in the X-ray. The Anaesthetist will be administering a cocktail of two separate drugs. One is a paralytic, one is a general anesthetic. They'll both enter your system together, but the paralytic is slightly faster acting. We need it so you don't start kicking my colleagues. His cheeks wrinkle from a smile concealed by his surgical mask, returning to studious concentration. It's normal to start feeling a stiffness, but please don't worry. It'll last only a moment. Just concentrate on your breathing and count backwards from 10. The anesthetic will take over from there. Good night. I calmly breathe in his instructions and focus on relaxing my body. The anesthetist's hand tremor as he hooks the IV up to a forked tube connecting two syringes. With his shaking palm, he pushes both plungers, and immediately I feel a tightening of my muscles. I close my eyes, breathe calmly, and begin counting backward from 10. Nothing. I count again, but I find myself fully conscious, now unable to open my eyes. My pulse quickens as I struggle to elicit movement in every fiber of my being. All I can muster is a slight twitch of my finger. I am locked inside my body. I hear the scraping of metal instruments as they prepare for the surgery. One of them must have noticed something as the Anaesthetist interjects. "Excuse me, I need to adjust the cocktail. One moment." Relief sets in. With a shuffling and a small tug on my hand, a new sensation washes over me. But it is not sleep. My chest feels heavy on my lungs. Breathing becomes labored. Even the slightest quiver is now impossible. I wait in helpless anticipation for the anesthetic to set in. Still nothing. I don't know what I've been given, but it's wrong. My heartbeat slows against the tide of adrenaline. Fluid pools in my lungs, and I feel as if I'm drowning. They should surely notice, but all I hear is faint murmuring and the shuffling of feet. A scalpel pierces my lower abdomen, slicing downwards towards my groin. My throat burns as I force a scream. Not a whimper leaves my mouth. Frozen in perpetual calm, my soul writhes from the confines of its tomb, shackled to the gurney, smothered in a mask of unconsciousness. I am still here. I am burning. I have reached a layer of hell unfit for the living, and yet I am awake.